Within the My Hero Academia fan community there are many what ifs. What if Midoriya turned evil? What if Mirio was All Might's successor? And in this week, in a first of a two-part special to celebrate 100 videos on My Hero Academia on this channel, I'll be asking the question, what if Inko Midoriya was a pro hero? In this video I'll be looking at a timeline where Inko was your standard low to mid-ranking hero, and in the next video I'll be looking at a timeline where she's one of the biggest and most popular heroes in Japan. Before we get into this, let's establish a few rules. Okay, so if you're watching this video having seen the other video on this subject matter, or you just want to get straight into the main event itself, you can skip this section by going to the time point that you see on your screen now, as this section features the same details mentioned in that other video, and for those who haven't seen it and don't really know what this part of the video actually is, this is more about why I made the video like this than it actually being about content itself. So with all that said, let's get into it. First of all, it has to be said that whilst this is a what if, it isn't a what if in the way that you typically see them on YouTube. This isn't really a story and is more of an exercise in alternate history, one that is less focused on building a storyline and building characters, and is more about establishing facts and about how said facts can change the lives of the people in this world and how that itself would impact upon the story. I do this for three main reasons. Firstly, My Hero Academia operates on a very narrow time frame, so unlike a what if based upon the Dragon Ball universe where you can talk about events over the span of decades and how those events eventually cascade in radical new directions, with My Hero Academia that's very difficult to do as it's only really set over the span of about 12 to 18 months. Whilst Vigilantes does expand the timeline out, A, I've only just started reasoning it so I really can't use it, and B, we don't know if Inko as a superhero would really be active during that time period while all that stuff was happening, so there isn't really much to work on as far as creating a wider story here, or at least not that would be satisfying to me. Secondly, we don't know much about Inko Midoriya's past. As such, any kind of fan story in this style would have to create a lot of content to fill a lot of gaps in that story. You know, stuff like creating rivals, love interests, mentors, big bad villains you'd need to take down, a wider mystery and conspiracy for her to deal with, and so forth. And at that particular point, that story would become less of a what if and more of its own original story, and I simply, at this current moment, don't really have that kind of time to dedicate to a story like this. And three, I'll be honest, I really don't know if there's an appetite for what if videos here on YouTube on the subject of My Hero Academia. I know that there are some out there, but they're from bigger and far more established broadcasters than myself, people with far more experience in writing stories like this, and whilst, to be frank, I'm not new to creative writing, as I've been a professional writer now for about 17 years, I don't know if people actually want those kind of stories from me, because the success of those stories and those videos come from bigger content creators whose viewing figures might be down to people just wanting more content from them, more so than this because there's an audience out there that desperately wants what ifs based on My Hero Academia. So basically, rather than telling a story, I'm going to be going over the major changes that Inko Midoriya being a hero will create for herself, her family, and by extension the world around her, and I'm presenting it like this due to a lack of material to base it off of, and a lack of confidence that people actually want what ifs based on My Hero Academia. A key thing that I did realise when putting this video together, and this is true for both the timelines, hence why I'm mentioning it here, is that the absence of Izuku Midoriya's father and the circumstances that could have led to that absence would be a major impact upon Izuku's upbringing in this timeline, arguably more so than in the main timeline. Say, for example, his father was a hero who died in action. That could result in Inko not wanting to be a hero anymore, or forbidding Izuku from ever becoming one, both of which could result on Izuku not becoming a hero at all and doing something radically different. Or maybe his father divorced Inko before she became famous, and is now trying to worm his way back into the life because she has money now, and maybe this itself will create resentment within Izuku towards people like that and heroes that are more focused about money than anything else, thus potentially making him more sympathetic to the hero killer stain. In any case, you get the idea. The absence of Izuku's father and the knock-on effects that could have would be so vast that it could change everything, and trying to account for all those many different possibilities would be maddening, and at a certain point this video would stop being about Inko Midoriya being a hero and more about Izuku Midoriya's father. With that in mind, and I'd hate to do this given how important that would be, I'm going to have to say that whatever circumstances led to Izuku's father being removed from his life are as unimportant here as they are in the main series, or at least as far as the flow of events are concerned. Sure, a future special, OVA or movie might reveal more, but for the sake of this scenario, we're gonna say that it really doesn't matter. Again, I'm not exactly happy about this, but so that we don't go insane with all the different possibilities that just that alone throws up, we're going to saying that it really doesn't matter. With all that said, let's get to it. When it came to doing this particular timeline, I used a random number generator to determine how well known or not Inko Midoriya would be as a pro hero, blocking off any numbers that I deemed being to be narratively significant. And given that the Wild Pussycats are ranked 411th and are still rather well known in the end, I decided to use a range from 450 to 900, and my random number generator gave me 542. So she's not totally obscure, but not a household name either. Given that in this timeline Inko Midoriya is a low-ranking hero, I'm going to say that she didn't attend UA, as even before All Might graduated from it and raised its profile, I have a feeling that UA has almost always been the best hero school in the country. And I'm gonna be honest, I can't see a graduate of that school being such a low-ranking hero. Sure, their star could fade, but given the kind of exposure and industry connections you could get from going to school like that, I can't see someone dropping off that much, not without a controversy or two to take them down. As such, I'm going to say that instead she went to some otherwise generic hero school, one which was decent enough for her to get into the industry, but wasn't her golden ticket to stardom, because with hero work, like with the entertainment industry, it isn't what you know, it's who you know. I imagine that she would have been a very attentive student and would ultimately become a skilled hero. Her quirk, if properly trained, could be useful in both combat and rescue. These combined would help her to reach higher levels than her education otherwise would allow. Her caring personality and tenacious spirit will make her a decently popular hero in the districts and areas that she patrols. She would become very much your friendly neighbourhood superhero type. What would her superhero name be? Well, that's for you to suggest in the comments down below. Why should they be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants it to do? Because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good. Now back to the events itself. Given that she's also around the same age as All Might, she likely would have helped to deal with the aftermath of All For One's reign. That's not to say that she would be on the front line, but she would have been around to help keep the peace. This would have helped her to establish herself as a hero and give her valuable field experience that her education wouldn't have allowed. Eventually, of course, she would have found the man who would become Izuku's father. As said previously, I'm keeping this part rather canon as far as what happened to him is concerned. Whatever happened, happened, and ultimately it wasn't important enough to radically change the directions of the events of this particular story. Now, given the fact that Izuku makes no mention of him or mentions ever remembering his father, I imagine that his father left or died before he was born, which itself starts to lead us to our first major divergent point in the life of Izuku Midoriya, one which will be developed and talked about over the course of this particular what-if scenario. Given that Inko is a single mother and a pro hero, she likely would have had to have taken time off work to raise her son, leading to the kind of scenes that we see in the earlier parts of the series. However, eventually she would have had to have returned to work, meaning that someone else would have needed to care for Izuku during the day, as well as helped out when Inko was too busy. This could have led to Inko's family or Izuku's father's family being in the picture far more, resulting to a far stronger connection between them and Izuku and giving them a far greater presence within the wider story. I can't see her being totally cut off from the world of heroing while she's on her maternity leave, however. I still think that she might have been called upon to help out here and there, but it would ultimately only be lighter stuff. Things like crowd control during an event, going over evidence and doing light admin work. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it would bring in money, and it would help keep her active while Izuku is still little. It would be around this time period that Inko would consider giving up on being a hero, as having a child really changes his perspectives on life. And for Inko, it would be doubly so given her job and just how dangerous it is, and not wanting to leave Izuku in the world without any parents to care for him. But for the sake of this scenario, I'm going to say that Inko remains a hero, only to return to work full-time around the time that Izuku starts school properly, with her shifts getting longer the older that he gets. As previously stated, to help Inko raise Izuku, she'd have to rely on help from her extended family. However, if her extended family isn't involved for whatever reason, that role would end up falling to neighbours or family friends. On the face of it, that shouldn't change much, unless of course said neighbours have children of their own. Now, this itself might seem rather inconsequential on the face of things, but this itself could potentially set off a cascade of events which could radically change everything! But more on that later. Knowing that his mother is a superhero would be incredibly inspiring for the young Izuku Midoriya, given her heroic past and what a great mother she seems to be. As far as Izuku is concerned, Inko is the coolest mum on the planet. Will this impact upon his admiration for All Might? No, but for many years All Might would ultimately have to play a second fiddle to Inko. The revelation that Izuku doesn't have a quirk, however, would hit far harder in this timeline than in the main series. I would say it would be seen as a far crueler twist of fate that the son of a pro hero was born quirkless, and that, for the time being at least, the world of hero work will be slammed shut for him in an incredibly painful way. However, given that Inko is a pro hero and a great mother, she would do everything in her power to ensure that Izuku had the best chance in becoming a hero himself. Inko knows that the chances of Izuku becoming a pro hero are incredibly slim, and it would be difficult for him to do so without a quirk, but if Izuku really wanted to become one, by gum she's going to help him every step of the way. She would train him where possible, helping build his fitness for fieldwork, showing him the realities of what a world like that really is, and letting him meet quirkless heroes and learning about how they go about things, or at least as best that she can do given her rank. Would this change anything? Yes and no. On the one hand, Izuku isn't going to become some kind of quirkless wunderkind who's going to get into UA without a quirk, but on the other hand, his mind and body would be far better developed before gaining one for all, which itself might give him extra time with All Might to learn how to better use his powers, resulting in a better performance in his entrance exam, also giving him a head start on learning more complex hero moves and preventing him from damaging himself quite as much as he does so in the early stages of the story. Now, providing that the relationship between Izuku, Bakugo and the presence of a possible whole new friend circle doesn't impact upon the social life of Izuku Midoriya all that much, things wouldn't be radically different from the main canon. Though with that said, that's only providing that these new friends are just kind of there, much how Bakugo's friends in the opening episodes ultimately were, with their presence in the story not really impacting upon anything. However, if Izuku was closer to these hypothetical new friends than he was with Bakugo, well, this is the point where things really start to change. If the children of Inko's friends and neighbours who babysat young Midoriya become firm childhood friends with him, this could impact upon his relationship with Bakugo, possibly with them in time replacing Bakugo as Izuku's best friend and or rival, with Bakugo being seen less as a lost friend who became a bully and being seen more as just a straightforward bully. This could lead to a far stronger feeling of resentment between the two of them and Izuku's new friends in this timeline, especially if they went to the same school as one another. And if these hypothetical new friends also share Izuku's love for superheroes, they too might attempt to attend UA. And if they were successful, it could result in them taking the place of another character, with someone from Class 1A being bumped down to Class 1B, and someone from Class 1B either being bumped down to a general studies course, or failing to get into UA at all. Now of course, I'm not going to go through every single fight and every single scenario that all the different UA students were in to see how this would radically change stuff, as that's not really in the remit of this kind of video, but you kind of get the idea as to what kind of a knock-on effect that could end up having. Or potentially, if said friends failed to get into UA, this would result in Midoriya having to deal with a far more hostile Bakugo on his own, and with no one being there to really have his back and protect him in quite the same way as before, this would be a bad thing. Yeah, sure, some of the other students at UA would help to protect him and stand up for him, but this itself might not be enough, with the worst case scenario being here that if their relationship doesn't start to mend and improve, things could prove to be rather disastrous, especially when you bear in mind just how hostile things were between them in the main timeline in the early stages of the story. In a timeline where their relationship continued to fester, potential with them being almost outright hostile to one another before getting into UA, and things not improving, this could lead to a scenario with Bakugo getting expelled from UA if he proved to be far too problematic for the school to deal with. Now honestly, do I think this would happen? No, because I feel that at the end of the day, the two of them would eventually put aside their differences, but it wouldn't be because of them rediscovering a lost friendship, but more because they realise that they need to work together out of a sense of preserving the greater good. And in the end, once the big bad is dealt with and Japan is saved, they'd just go their separate ways and not really care much for one another, just drifting apart and going on with their lives, with the only thing stopping their rivalry getting worse being from the simple fact that they've seen what happens when superhero rivalries get bad firsthand, and at the end of the day, they just become distant people that just so happen to go to the same high school around the same time as one another. They wouldn't really care much for one another. Of course, if you want a timeline where Bakugo becomes a bad guy, this is probably one of the ways it would end up happening, but ultimately I don't think that would end up happening. Now, I know that I haven't really talked much about Inko over the past few minutes, as again, this is presented more as a case of alternate history than fanfiction, but at the same time, there isn't really much going on at this particular juncture in the story that she would be involved with, and any change that happened around this time period would be more as a result of the fact that she's a hero, more so than her actions directly. With that said, Inko would be insanely proud that Izuku got into UA. It would be a dream come true for her. I would give her a hell of a boost. Seeing her son entering into the family business and starting to make a name for himself would be a great and inspiring thing for her to see. And while she might be worried about the results of the attack at the USJ, it's not like there was really much she could have done to stop it. I mean, it's not like she could have become a teacher, as she would lack the experience or clout to really do so, and if she did have it, UA simply might not have an opening for her. Though of course she might still request to come along on future field trips to help out, as some parents tend to do in the real world, or at least they did for a time period in the UK. And of course, the next major school field trip would be a totally uneventful affair, and her powers certainly wouldn't be needed. Beyond this, I think that she would just be over the moon to just see how well Izuku is doing, especially when it comes to the UA Sports Festival. She would be proud as punch, and she'd be amazed, she'd be over the moon, and the only other thing she'd really be doing around this time period would be helping to look for the hero killer Stain, though to be honest, she'd just be there to help. She wouldn't be one of the main investigators, and it would just be part of her overall patrol, just keeping an eye out for him. The only other major change that I could see around this time period would come with the whole work placement stuff. Inko would be hoping, of course, that Izuku would opt to do his work placement with her. They might well have talked about it frequently in the past, and knowing that Izuku would be doing his work placement far more earlier than in the case of other times at studying at UA, she'd be overjoyed at getting an opportunity to spend time with her son and saving the day like a good parent-child superhero duo would do. It's just a shame that it wouldn't happen. In the end, Izuku was still doing his work placement under Gran Torino, per the request of him and All Might, so that he can get a better grasp of his powers. Not knowing the full details as to why Izuku would be doing this, given that she doesn't know where Izuku's co-work really came from, she'd be puzzled and honestly heartbroken at the fact that he's choosing to do his work placement with a retired hero rather than with her. Yeah, she'd still be supportive, but she'd still be upset. But she would still take heart from the fact that Izuku promised that the next work placement he does would be done with her, and I'm sure that that's a promise he would definitely keep. Of course, she'd just be hopeful that his work placement with Gran Torino would be totally uneventful and that nothing bad would end up happening like what happened at the USJ, and well, that's maybe a dream that might not come true. But anyway, that's a story for a whole other time, as that's where we're going to be leaving things for here and now. If you want this particular storyline to be continued, let me know in the comment section down below. Next week, I will be looking at a timeline where she not only did Inko Midoriya become a hero, but she became one of the most famous heroes in the country. Until then, see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!